Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times, a Prancing Pony podcast production. I'm the Man of the West, and we're going to continue what we've been doing since August on Third Age Thursdays, looking at the poetry and songs from The Lord of the Rings. Last week, we longed for Gondor as Aragorn looked south to the White Mountains, and we spent a great deal of time with Treebeard. This week, it's all Treebeard as we read about the Willow Meads of Tessaranen. Treebeard is explaining to Merry and Pippin who the Ents are, their relation to the trees, and more. Now, the whole conversation is wonderful, but this is about the poetry and songs, so we'll start with just a paragraph or two before that. Aye, there was all one wood once upon a time, from here to the mountains of Lune, and this was just the east end. Those were the broad days. Time was when I could walk and sing all day and hear no more than the echo of my own voice in the hollow hills. The woods were like the woods of Lothlorien, only thicker, stronger, younger, and the smell of the air. I used to spend a week just breathing. Treebeard fell silent, striding along and yet making hardly a sound with his great feet. Then he began to hum again and passed into a murmuring chant. Gradually, the hobbits became aware that he was chanting to them. In the willow meads of Tessaranen I walked in the spring. Ah, the sight and the smell of the spring in Nan Tessarian, and I said that was good. I wandered in summer in the elm woods of Osiriand. Ah, the light and the music in the summer by the 7 rivers of Osir, and I thought that was best. To the beaches of Neldareth I came in the autumn. Ah, the gold and the red and the sighing of leaves in the autumn in Taurna Neldor. It was more than my desire. To the pine trees upon the highland of Dorthonion I climbed in the winter. Ah, the wind and the whiteness and the black branches of winter upon Orodnathon. My voice went up and sang in the sky, and now all those lands lie under the wave, and I walk in Amronna, in Taramorna, in Aldalome, in my own land, in the country of Fangorn, where the roots are long, and the years lie thicker than the leaves in Taramornalome. He ended and strode on silently, and in all the wood, as far as ear could reach, there was not a sound. In many ways, this poem of Treebeard's echoes Galadriel's song about Eldamar. Not the Quenya lament, but the one we covered back in week 69, where she laments the passing of time, marked by the change in seasons, leaves of gold, then the winter comes, and then the leaves fall in the stream and the river flows away. Here we see spring in Nan Tessarian, summer in Osiriand, fall in Neldareth, and winter in Dorthonion, all as Treebeard speaks of the sorrow of these lands, now lying under the wave. It's interesting to observe that, as he does throughout his conversations with the hobbits, Treebeard uses the common speech, but includes a lot of words in both Quenya and Sindarin, sometimes even mixing them, and that the places he remembers are all deeply connected with trees. The willow meads of Tessaranen, right? In the appendix in the Silmarillion, we learn that Tessare is Quenya for willow, hence Nan Tessarian. The Sindarin word is Tathar, which we see in the Sindarin name for the same place, Nan Tathran, literally Valley of the Willows. And that's where Narog flowed into Sirion, according to the text. Now the great and fair country of Beleriand lay on either side of the mighty river Sirion, renowned in song, which rose at Aethel Sirion and skirted the edge of Ardgallan ere he plunged through the pass, becoming ever fuller with the streams of the mountains. Thence he flowed south for 130 leagues, gathering the waters of many tributaries, until, with a mighty flood, he reached his many mouths and sandy delta in the Bay of Balar. And following Sirion from north to south, there lay upon the right hand in West Beleriand the forest of Brethil between Sirion and Teglin, and then the realm of Nargothrond between Teglin and Narog. And the river Narog rose in the falls of Ivrin in the southern face of Dorloman, and flowed some 80 leagues ere he joined Sirion in Nantathran, the land of willows. South of Nantathran was a region of meads filled with many flowers, where few folk dwelt. And beyond lay the marshes and isles of reed about the mouths of Sirion, and the sands of his delta, empty of all living things, save birds of the sea. Now, the second of the places in Treebeard's poem here is the only one whose name isn't directly tree-related. It's Osiriand, the land of 7 rivers. But I want you to take note of what it is that Treebeard remembers about Osiriand, the elm woods. Now, the other 2 places have names directly connected to trees. The first one, where he spends the autumn, is Neldoreth. Neldor is beech. Interestingly, though, in the appendix, Christopher explains that Neldor was properly the name of Hirolorn, the great beech tree with 3 trunks, from Nelde, meaning 3, and Orn, which is tree. And of course, Taur na Neldor is just beech forest, since Taur is forest. Neldoreth was part of Doriath. Southward lay the guarded woods of Doriath, abode of Thingol the hidden king, into whose realm none passed save by his will. Its northern and lesser part, the forest of Neldoreth, was bounded east and south by the dark river Escalduin, which bent westward in the midst of the land. And between Aros and Escalduin lay the denser and greater woods of Region. And finally, the fourth of the places that he lists is Dorthonion, where Treebeard recalls his winter. Sindarin Dor is a land, and Thon is pine, so the land of pines, and where there is also Orodnathon, which is a mountain of pine. South of Ardgalan, the great highland named Dorthonion stretched for 60 leagues from west to east. Great pine forests it bore, especially on its northern and western sides. By gentle slopes from the plain it rose to a bleak and lofty land, where lay many tarns at the feet of bare tors, whose heads were higher than the peaks of Eredwethrin. But southward, where it looked towards Doriath, it fell suddenly in dreadful precipices. Dorthonion was famously the place where Barahir and his last 12 companions, including Beren, hid from Morgoth. Now, one last thing that is interesting about Treebeard and these places, this time from a letter, number 247, where Tolkien acknowledges that there are or were no Ents in the older stories, because the Ents, in fact, only presented themselves to my sight without premeditation or any previous conscious knowledge when I came to Chapter 4 of Book 3. Now, okay, that explains why you don't read about the Ents in the Silmarillion, Alan, but what does that have to do with today's poem? I'm glad you asked. But since Treebeard shows knowledge of the drowned land of Beleriand, west of the mountains of Lune, in which the main action of the war against Morgoth took place, they will have to come in. But as the war in Beleriand was at the time of the Hobbits' meeting some 7,000 years ago, no doubt they were not quite the same. Less wise, less strong, shyer, and more uncommunicable, their own language simpler, but their knowledge of other tongues very small. And that's it. Folks, thank you for joining me for this week's Third Age Thursday. Be sure to come back tomorrow for First Age Friday for more poetry in the Lay of Lathian. Check out patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, join my content council, get a bonus weekly episode, and more. Podcast listeners, please be sure to subscribe to the TTT in your podcast apps. For those on YouTube, subscribe to this channel to get all of the PPP productions, including every episode of the Prancing Pony podcast, the Rings of Power wrap-up, this show, and my new streaming project, The PPP Plays. And be sure you're following at Prancing Pony Pod on Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and simply the Prancing Pony Podcast on Facebook. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.